I am Neelanjan Mukhopadhyay. The history of modern India is laced with internal strife and conflict. On the 31st of October 1984, Indira Gandhi was assassinated by two of her bodyguards, bringing down the curtains on one of the most contentious political careers. Her assassination was followed by 3 days of mayhem in Delhi, several big cities of North India and large parts of the rest of the country. Murder, arson and loot were committed at will by frenzied mobs, even as the state almost withered away for those 72 hours. It remains the biggest post-independence massacre in India. The Anti-Sikh riots or pogrom weighs heavily on the conscience of the nation. It also casts a shadow on the consciousness of the community. What role do memories of these events play on the psyche of the people? How has the issue of political and legal culpability played out over these past 3 decades? I am joined by 3 eminent people who have seen these events from the ringside and have remained active in the discourse that emerged. My first guest on this program is Mr. H.S. Phoolka, an eminent lawyer, someone who has spent almost a lifetime fighting for justice for the people who were the survivors and those who were deceased in 1984 riots. Uma Chakravarti, noted historian, someone who's also worked consistently, who's also authored this book called Delhi Riots, 3 Days in the Life of a Nation. Finally, I have Rahul Bedi, senior journalist, someone through whose eyes the India first really realized the horror that was Delhi riots in 1984. Rahul, I'd like to begin with you. Being a journalist, I would like to know from you, 30 years later, when we actually go out and talk to people that I'm doing a program on 1984 riots, a lot of people told me that why 84? Come on, is it not forgotten? What really relevance does it have? Why do you want to keep on digging up old wounds all the time? Why is it important for us to talk about?
I think it is important because this was the first time that the state acted in the manner it did. As you mentioned in your introduction, it was a pogrom,
right.
And that is what the state carried out. It was a pogrom which lasted 72 hours after Mrs. Gandhi was killed and came to an end only when Mrs. Gandhi was cremated. And there was complete lack of any kind of rule of law. The police were complicit. The politicians were complicit, the officials were complicit, the public was complicit. So I think it was the first time where the state in independent India at that time was the criminal.
Right. Uma Chakravarti, if I ask the same question to you, what does it really mean to you today talking about 84?
I think the important reason why we need to continuously remember 1984 is, as Rahul pointed out, it is the first big event of its kind in post-independence India.
Right.
And for the communities that had actually lived through the partition and seen themselves as as living now in their own watan, in their own nation, to find themselves targeted the way they were with the official complicity of the state has been one of the worst episodes in the life of people. So forgetting that is actually very difficult for them. But
right.
Equally, it's important for us to remember that if you deny justice, then at the end of the day, there is something that is broken down in the trust between people
right.
and their nation.
Right. Mr. Phoolka, having known you for almost 3 decades, and you were just a young lawyer who had come from Punjab and just began a professional career. It's been a long journey in the last 3 decades, in the sense that what you came out to be and what you eventually turned out to be, thanks to 1984, probably been the most defining moment in your life and also in the lives of many other people, but you probably epitomize as to how a single event completely changed the course of your professional career and your personal life. How do you, react to the argument of a large section of people that, come on, it's 30 years old, the riots have come, new generation has been brought up, they have very little understanding of what really happened. So why are you keeping this issue alive?
I'm a lawyer, I'll bring the legal aspect into it.
Right.
The country need to send a message. Nobody is above law.
Right.
Howsoever high you may be, you have to abide by the law. And the people who in the capital of the country was killing the citizens of the country openly, in open daylight, they are given prominent positions. When today, after 30 years, today, even those people are enjoying the security. There are 40-50 security guards given to them, huge bungalows given to them, government cars are given to them. Now, throughout this time, message has gone that these people are above the law. Now, I will not confine only to them, but I will go ahead with the saying, a message has gone in the country that a political boss is larger than law. What a politician say, you do it, you will not be touched. Now, I give you an example. In Jajjar and Haryana, few years back, 2 Dalits were lynched because they were skinning a cow. The Sarpanch of the village said, they have killed the cow. You first kill those Dalits, then after that you realize it that these cows were killed 2 days back. Right. Because the Sarpanch has said, you kill these Dalits, you go and kill them, then you think about it. So this is a message which need to go. Any politician, political leader, he is not above law. The people have to understand it, that his command cannot absolve you from the law. That is what we are fighting for. It's not a revenge. Right. It is for the secure future of the country, and that is necessary that a message need to go.
And to maintain the constitutional norms in this country. Now, if you actually go back and revisit what happened those 3 days, if you actually try to look at 31st of October when Indira Gandhi was assassinated, news started spreading by afternoon that the event had happened. If you actually goes and try to recreate as to how the violence got escalated, it basically started out in a fairly spontaneous manner, an anger against Sikhs, just seeing them, Then thereafter, as the people realized that probably there was no stopping, it became slightly more sustained, more aggressive in nature. Shops started getting looted, buses started getting burned. But it's only from the next day that when you still felt that there was actually still no attempt to prevent anything from the side of the police, did it really start taking a very violent and a nasty turn, and that is when you stumbled on the horror called Trilokpuri.
Yes, in fact it started off very close to the All India Institute where Mrs. Gandhi was brought after she was shot, and then it sort of fanned out and became very violent and virulent. The following day it spread to places like Chandni Chowk, Connaught Circus, and it spread to in a very systematic manner. And then, as you said, it spread to places like the Lokpuri, where in a small narrow street about 320 people were massacred very casually over 48, 72 hours. I mean, the horror, I think the official death toll was about 2,700 or 3,000.
Yes, true. Close to slightly more than 2,700.
2,700
by the Ahuja committee, which is
the official figure is
from the government side.
Official figure is 2,700. The unofficial figure is
itself from Block 32 of Trilokpuri.
320 or 380 people from Block 32 in Trilokpuri, and I think the official figure is probably underestimated.
Right.
It was probably twice as much, but it was systematic. It was done in a very casual way,
right.
And it was done with the connivance of the official machinery and the state.
Right. It's time for me to take a little break. At this time, I'll come back and resume this conversation. For every gruesome act, there were an equal number of actions aimed at providing relief and rehabilitation. If the program itself was the biggest post-independence massacre, then the citizens' initiative to provide relief and rehabilitation was the largest ever spontaneous outpouring of humanism. Stay tuned in. This program will continue, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to a page from history. It is the 30th anniversary of the Anti-Sikh riots, and we are talking about not just how and why the event shook the nation, but also how India staged a recovery. Uma Chakravarti, the riots happened, thousands of people were uprooted, moving into places where there was hardly any proper adequate shelter, very little effort from the side of the government to provide relief and assistance to the people, no ration supplies, no medical supplies, people badly wounded. At that time, Delhi showed a rare side of humanism which has probably not been seen ever again. This is a city which is considered to be a heartless city. Where did so much of humanism come from?
I would rephrase it as it's humanist, but it's also still invested in the idea that your fellow people are being have been targeted in the way they were, and that was not acceptable to some sections of the population of Delhi, surely. So there were large numbers of people who responded simply as fellow citizens of the nation and responding to the crisis. And I remember you didn't even wait 3 days. You actually were out on the streets immediately. And in my area, I lived in Model Town at that stage. We had 3 Sardars in our lane. There was no question that the mobs would be allowed, because the citizens actually went into
vigil to ensure that they were safe.
So we did that, and immediately afterwards also, as soon as things opened up, we started going to the relief camps. The relief camps were actually interestingly set up while the government did nothing. Often the camp was in some school site. So we went to these camps and began actually immediately the process of documenting. So that was almost immediate action. While you assembled medical supplies and relief and so on, you also started to listen to the accounts that people were giving. And one of the things that I think has not been noticed enough is the response of civil society in the form of democratic rights groups beginning to document and fact find on
that very famous, or rather the infamous book called the Kali Kitab, or it was called PUCL and PUDR came out by the 3rd week of October.
And it was these trips to these events, because we all collected information. So while the journalists were doing their accounts, some of us were also collecting accounts from the survivors whom we met in the camps, and that's how that famous book came into existence, which actually was very important, because it also indicated that, in a sense, it was not a communal riot of the kind that we sometimes think. It was actually seen, therefore, and understood as not people so much, large numbers of people against other people. It was clearly seen as state and government letting down its people by acts of commission and by acts of omission. So ultimately it was the program could take place because there was this complicity in that sense.
There's been this entire debate on as to what do we really call 1984. Do we call it a riot? Do we call it a carnage? Do we call it a pogrom? So there are various, everybody has a different word to it, but basically all indicating about something which was just a metaphor for an horror which probably should never have happened. That is the way you can possibly best look at it. Mr. Phoolka, when you go back and actually look at the citizens' response to it, especially from various middle classes. Now, the middle class is traditionally not known to reacting on political lines, but somehow at that particular time there was a lot of political response from the middle classes. How do you explain this? And it happened, completely in an uncoordinated manner. There was one group functioning out of Lajpat Bhavan, there was one group functioning in West Delhi. Delhi University had their own relief groups. There were various people going on, and in field when they would go and meet, the relief workers would meet each other, and then there would be very fine coordination between various people, and so that they were not duplicating each other's work.
These groups were throughout Delhi. When I was going into relief,
this is what I'm trying to understand, that in a city which did not have a tradition, how did it suddenly happen? Was it because of this unique bondness which was there between Hindus and Sikhs?
Apart from bondness, I would say, it was the anger towards the state. If those mobs didn't have the support of the police and the government, I am sure the citizens of Delhi would have stopped on their own these mobs. It is only because those mobs had the mighty of the state to support them and the police to support them. Many groups came out, like the Chandrasekhar took out a march, many other people took out a march. Chaudhary Devilal, Ramvilas Paswan, Charan Singh, they were running from pillar to post to call the army. Ramvilas Paswan's own house was burnt. Advani, Bajpai came out, Madanlal Khan, many people, and apart from that, the whole lot of the civil society, many professor journalists, but the Lords group in the robes, they collected at the Supreme Court, and they went to the Ropuri side. Jethmalani, Benu Gopal, Tarkunde, Shanti Bhushan, Prashant Bhushan, many of them. But the point is that at that stage they couldn't stop it. When they realized they couldn't stop it, so then they turned to this rehabilitation side. So at least let's do some relief work. Now in these relief camps, when I was going to the relief camps were taken care only by the people from the civil society. The government was totally
completely absent.
It was
in fact by the 15th
the biggest group was Nagrik Ekta Manch.
Yes.
And apart from Nagrik Ekta Manch, there were many other people and many throughout many other groups also who were looking after the relief camps.
Right. Rahul, Uma Chakravarti was talking about the documentation which was done. Now if you actually go back as a journalist look at who are the guilty, probably it would be considered to be among the first real instances of what is today popularly called as citizen journalism. You know, anyone going out, young volunteers not trained in the art of journalism, going collecting information and the information being put together and a booklet came out. At that time there were several journalists who questioned the veracity of the manner in which the report was put together, and also the decision to list the names of people who were named by the survivors of the riots as having personally orchestrated or led the riots. You know, as a journalist, how do you go back and look at the relevance and the need for a report like Who Are the Guilty, which was followed by reports by other fact-finding commissions of that time?
Well, I think there were about 7 or 9 fact-finding commissions.
Yeah.
There have been 10. It's completed the figure now.
Okay. But before I answer that question, I will say that this happened in 1984 before the advent of electronic television. I think if electronic television had been there, probably the death toll and the riots would not have been as severe, and the death toll would not have probably been as high, for the simple reason that it would have been exposed. At that point in time, very few newspapers actually reported the truth. A lot of them were going along with the state.
I think yours was the only paper which reported Trilokpuri when happened.
That's right.
It was only after 2 days that other papers started reporting on the violence that was happening.
That's right. As far as the other papers were concerned, they were following the official line. When the death toll in Delhi was roughly about 1,500, Mr. Gawai, who was then the Lieutenant Governor but was removed shortly after, said that I think 15 or 18 people have been killed. He issued a press note. So, I mean, it was that ridiculous, and most newspapers, other than the Indian Express, for which I was then working, had reported the official line. But as far as the documentation is concerned, I think it was very, very important. Not that it really came to very much, because convictions, as Mr. Phoolka told us earlier, there have been about 30 convictions, mostly of lowly individuals, lowly police officers.
No police officer.
Lowly.
No police officers or no policeman has been indicted. 30 people have been convicted, of which about 12 are still in jail. So I think it was important to shame them and name them. But I think 30 years down the line, there still has been no closure. And I think closure in these cases is very, very important, not only for the people concerned, but I think as a society and as a political system, we need reconciliation and we need closure. And I think closure will come at the end of the day with some convictions which are still in the pipeline.
Right. Uma Chakravarti, during, in the aftermath of the riots, one of the first important thing was that suddenly within Delhi or in other parts of the country also, you had this huge number of young widows, young women who had been widowed. So there was this question of rehabilitation for them which came up. One of the things which was suggested, the opposition to it, but eventually that was practiced, to set up separate colonies for widows. They came to be still known as widow colonies. You have one in Tilak Vihar, you have one in Gadi, and you have one in Rohini, 3 different places. How do you look at this idea, of having separate colonies for women who become widowed?
See, at that point, I think the critical issue was the idea of safety.
Right.
The women and women and children, because the targeting was. It's not that
most of the survivors were from the resettlement colonies, and most of them had to go back and live with the people who they felt were the people who led the attacks.
They were still roaming the streets,
right.
And they were actually mocking at these people.
Right.
So at the end of the day, the only way to provide some form of safe housing was if you place them in a certain area. Now, also we must remember that the whole process of compensation and reparations, I mean, I don't even like to call it compensation, I like to call it reparation, because you don't compensate with money, you have to repair the harm done.
Right.
And some of it was a struggle. First, the amount of money. It was actually, so women had to survive under extremely adverse circumstances, and that is what led finally to the setting up of these safe houses that you had. And it was like a safe house, but it was a whole colony. Now, the other thing that was interesting is that the assumption of themselves, the name widow, is something that they took on for themselves, which was interesting, because it gave them both the survivor status, but it also gave them a certain dignity in a situation where otherwise, the words for, widows are not treated very well in our country anyway. So in a sense, there was this special status that they assumed for themselves. But it's been a tragic story, and it hasn't been easy to rehabilitate. I think the tragedy is that while you set up these colonies, there has been a sense of beleagueredness and a sense of victimization which has not gone away. And I think it is carried on to the second generation, to the children.
You have new problems, new conflicts in these colonies.
If I may just add to what the professor is saying, I think the reparation was also very grudgingly and gracelessly done.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was very reluctant on the part of the state.
The human touch was completely absent in whatever the administration did at that particular time. It's time for me to take another break. I'll come back and resume this conversation. Since 1984, a string of commissions of inquiry and investigative committees have been formed, and almost endlessly they have continued. Yet the outcome remains questionable. This is the prime reason for the erosion of confidence of the people in the ability of the state to provide them with justice. Though the police claims that almost 450 people have been convinced by courts, it still does not send the message that justice has been done. Why is this? Stay with us. We will return after a short break. A page from history. 30 years ago, it appeared that India had become a lawless state as 3 days of violence during the Anti-Sikh riots eroded the trust which was developed over generations. Mr. Phoolka, when we talk about what was done in way of inquiring what really happened, besides whatever documentation was done by the citizens groups, by civil society, or by the media, by journalists like Rahul Bedi, there had to be some kind of an official investigation. The first committee was set up headed by Mr. Ved Marwa. Before it could finalize its reports, it was wound up, and what happened to its proceedings, little is known. The Mishra Commission was set up quite belatedly sometime in the first quarter of 1985. It's been an endless story from 1985 to 2000 when the Nanavati Commission was set up. Then eventually the report was also tabled during a debate. The Prime Minister of India at that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh, apologized to the nation, said that what had happened in 1984 was very unfortunate, should never have happened. But at the end of it, what's the sum total of all these inquiries and committees? What is your assessment? You have been very intimately connected with the pursuit of justice.
Let me first point out one thing. When the Nanavati Commission report came in 2005, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh apologized after 3 days of bashing by the media and by the opposition. To start with, they rejected all the recommendation of Nanavati Commission. This is on 8th of August. So for 2 days Parliament didn't work. For 2 days there was bashing from the media and from civil society. On 11th August he apologized. Now let's go back to this commissions and committees. There has been 10 commissions and committees. This is another cover-up, a biggest and huge cover-up. 30 years of this cover-up. You mentioned about the Marwa Commission. You see, Mr. Rahul Bedi, he was himself there at the Rokpuri. He spent night, he went to for a story, but he forgot the story and he remained there himself. And he saw that how the police has been totally not only negligent, has been a party to this killing. So after that, he filed a writ petition in the High Court. His own experiences and his own encounter with the police officers, with the DCP and with the Additional Commissioner. Now the High Court,
Nikhil Kumar and
the government took a stand over there. Marwa committee is appointed. Marwa will consider about it. So please send it to Marwa. So it was sent to Marwa committee. Now when the Marwa committee completed its report, it was towards the end of 1985, when Marwa was asked, you stopped your inquiry, now give it to Mishra Commission. Mishra Commission is appointed. Now Marwa in various TV interviews have said that he had identified number of police officers who had actually either connived or grossly were negligent.
Right.
So to save them, protect them, this was done. Now the Mishra in 1987 gives his report, says it is not part of my job to identify anybody. So, but Rahul Bedi said in November 1984 in the High Court that this is what I am saying, this is what happened. When nobody is to inquire about it, 87 another committee is appointed. Now this Kusum Mittal committee, she submits her report in 1990. So 6-year times comes only to see the veracity of the allegations of Mr. Rahul Bedi, and like Mr. Rahul Bedi, the other people who are not even the victims but from the independent people from the society. In 1990 the report comes. Kusum Mittal says that DCP and the Additional Commissioner both, she said that the action should be taken up against them. 36 police officers, she said, should be dismissed without even any further inquiry. And what happens? That DCP got 3 promotions after that, retired as a Special Commissioner of Police, and that additional CP became the CP, then the Director General, then Police, and then after that he became the Member of Parliament from the Congress Party.
Right.
I mean, these are the kind of the rewards.
Right.
I mean, not only the politicians got the rewards, even the police officers.
Right.
Now, like that, the report of none of these committees was implemented.
Right.
There has been committee after committee, and you spend a few years, then you do not implement
Right.
the report. This is happening.
Yeah, Uma Chakravarti, I would like you to add on to what Mr. Phoolka has said. You are also closely connected with the process of inquiries and commissions when it was being done, and a lot of groundwork which was done for Mishra Commission. I think you were quite connected with...
Well, more than me, it was much more Nandita Haksar. But we must also remember, see, I think the fundamental flaw, and if you look at the course of justice, it's actually, the attempt was to subvert it rather than to ensure that it was
so that some kind of truth comes
and Phoolka
Sahib is fixed.
Yeah, Phoolka Sahib has mentioned the fact that Rahul Bedi had given evidence in the High Court. So, civil society groups had moved the High Court to say there should be an inquiry commission.
Right.
Even that was obstructed. Can you imagine a situation where the courts then dismissed, they made some perverse remarks in my opinion, and finally when the commission was appointed, it was part of the deal that was being done between the Rajiv Longowal that led to the appointment of a commission. Now you do not, the course of justice is an independent venture.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with the political, discussion that is going on. So first to deny the Commission of Inquiry, then to limit its brief, and to say it is to inquire into the allegations of it being of organized violence.
Right.
So you are not actually going into to what happened. You are not looking at the carnage. You are not looking at the stage by stage at what happened. You are simply reducing it to the allegations that it was organized. So you are already writing it off. You are writing out the importance of the commission.
Right.
That is, unfortunately, commissions of inquiry themselves are part of the political machinations, and that's the most unfortunate thing. It doesn't deliver justice. Many Sikh groups actually withdrew from the Mishra Commission. I remember Nandita stopped going to the Mishra Commission so in a sense. And then when Nanavati Commission came...
a lot of people did not go back to Nanavati Commission because they felt it was going to be another whitewash.
Absolutely. And also look at it. Now in the Nanavati Commission, I want to mention this, we brought up widows, but we didn't talk about the sexual violence against women. Now in the Nanavati Commission, as late as that, there were still 4 women who gave affidavits and alleging this. There has been no movement on those cases. There has been absolutely no movement on those cases. So if you look at it from the point of view of who is capable, where is the responsibility, how will we, when systematically it is to obstruct justice that you have proceeded. Then I think it's tragic, and our job then became, as period, that is, we brought out a critique of each of these reports. So when Mishra Commission came, we had said justice denied. When so our job then was to keep on monitoring what was happening, and in a sense, civil society continued to remain active and continue to engage with the question, and that's really also an important issue when we think of the unfortunate incident that happened, but also the way some sections rose to stand above the way in which the justice was being subverted.
Right. Rahul Bedi, there has also been one argument, that it was very unfair on the part of the political leadership of this country to link the Sikhs outside Punjab with the Punjab discord, because they had really speaking nothing to do with what had happened in Punjab predating the riots here. Either Mrs. Gandhi's assassination had very little to do with their condition here, and they were victimized for something which had not been their crime. If at all it can be said to be a crime. We were talking about that how the Mishra Commission and the extension of the brief that it was got linked with the Rajiv Longowal Accord. Now, was it the second layer or the second level of injustice meted out to the Sikhs outside Punjab, Delhi and elsewhere?
Yes, I think it was, but I think we mustn't forget that the politics was being whipped up into an anti-Sikh emotion.
Right.
I think if you look at the advertising campaigns that took place after Mrs. Gandhi was shot, I think they were very vicious.
You want the fighters at the doorstep.
Exactly. They were not only vicious, they were downright nasty. And they had the endorsement of the political class. And that, I think, is proven and vindicated by the election results that came out, because Rajiv Gandhi won 400 plus seats in Parliament, which even his grandfather hadn't won, and the kind of majority he got. So yes, there was a linkage between the politics of what was going on in Punjab, and also there was a linkage between the terrorist activities that had taken place in Delhi over the previous 4 or 5 years, like the transistor bombings, the killings of people being hauled out of buses and trains, and that was very skillfully played out by the Congress party to whip up anti-Sikh sentiment, which in a sense boiled over when Mrs. Gandhi was killed.
Right. So, would you say that, Mr. Phoolka, that the issue of 1984, this entire imagery which was constructed in the course of the turbulent years of Punjab, which led to Mrs. Gandhi's assassination and then boiling over during the riots, was also used in successive elections as in the course of politics through the 80s and early 90s?
You see, in the 1984 elections itself, like Rahul has mentioned, there were posters were taken out with the photograph of a Sikh, "Can you trust this man?"
Right.
I mean, the elections are not being held in Punjab, but the campaign in whole of the country is being done by the Congress on this Anandpur Sahib resolution. The Akali Dal are saying that we only want a more Sarkariya Commission. That what is there in the Sarkariya Commission, we want implementation. They are being leveled and they are anti-nationals. So that obviously meant that the Congress wanted to just take the advantage of that situation. And they, all these killings, the issue of justice, the issue of law and order, they wanted to make it totally, purely a political issue.
Right. So crucial question arises at this stage, Uma Chakravarti, is that were other non-Congress parties ready to face the situation, or were they up to facing the situation, or they could not come up with an alternate narrative?
In 1984 or thereafter?
No, they failed in 1984 obviously because of the kind of verdict which is there. But thereafter also they could not fail, do for a long time till they got some other issues to be able to defeat the Congress in 1989. So was it not a failure from the entire political class?
Yes, it is, because how do you allow a narrative to emerge in which a particular section is held responsible for everything, for a larger... Now, I want to return to this question of who is culpable and who is not.
Right.
The bulk of the killings took place in Sultanpuri and in Trilokpuri.
Right.
they were not even Punjabi speaking.
Right.
They were actually Lavanya Sikhs from who were
Rajasthan.
originally from Sindh.
Very little to do. They were not fighting.
Nothing to do with, and as very poignantly pointed out by one of my informants when we did the book for 1984, he said they had moved from one place to another, and they had arrived in Delhi, and in Delhi Panditayal gave them 25 acres of land. So they were not even anti-Congress, they were actually supporters of the Congress, because the resettlement colonies were seen as...
Mrs. Gandhi used to be called as, some kind of a mother figure.
And the Lanki Bai, whose moving testimony is she said her husband was fasting, he had not even eaten in the morning, and he got killed. So this is actually the relationship between wrongs of one place being treated as as a sort of...
They were punished for a battle which they did not fight.
It is completely that, and that is tragic, and I think not enough of the political class has stood up against that, then as well as later. It seems to me that targeting of a group is something that all politicians like to look up, because that's the way then they can garner their own votes.
And I think also targeting is very easy because they were easy to identify. Because of their turbans and the way they...
But that's because
tried at that stage. Some political leaders tried, like I mentioned, this Ramvilas Paswan, Charan Singh, even Advani went to...
There were definitely some attempts. It's time for me to take another little break, and then I'll come back for the next segment. The roots of the anti-Sikh program were in politics. So how have political parties and the political process resolved the issue? To what extent have Sikhs become part of the political mainstream once again? What needs to be done to further ensure that the trauma of 1984 can be erased? We'll take a quick break and then come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to a page from history. It is 3 decades since the anti-Sikh program. Rahul Bedi, there is one question which keeps on coming up. We have discussed the anguish which 1984 generated among the Sikhs. But when you go back and actually look at electoral studies and look at the figures, we find that there have been a fair amount of support from the side of the Sikhs, both in Delhi or in other states where there has been Sikh-dominated constituencies, even in Punjab, for the Congress party. Not overwhelming support, but considerable, yes. How would you assess the Sikh voting behavior and their reintegration into the political mainstream?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, but I would answer it by saying that we had Dr. Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister for 10 years. He was the third longest serving Prime Minister after Mrs. Gandhi and her father. We've had 2 Sikh Chiefs of Army Staff. So there has been a participation of the Sikh community within the establishment. I think I personally very cynically believe that there will be no more justice as far as 84 is concerned.
Right.
I do not think that there will be any kind of reconciliation also. I think people have just moved on.
Right.
Despite people like Mr. Phoolka who are very dogged and very determined, but I don't think there will be much resonance, and the handful of politicians who are still in line to be prosecuted, I really don't know what the outcome of that is likely to be. But as far as the reconciliation of the Sikhs in the political process is concerned, I think it is again a work in progress, and I think it will probably in the next few decades, I think there will be some kind of a political reconciliation.
Right.
But I think the people who are affected personally, I mean, it's a personal tragedy for them.
Right. Mr. Phoolka, this is something very interesting which I'd like to ask you. If you look at Delhi and look at the participation of Sikh politicians in various political parties in the aftermath of 1984, you would find fairly important leaders who were very young during 1984, who are in very dominant positions in the Congress party at the moment. They also had fairly important positions in the BJP at various levels. Probably for the first time there was an alternative in 2013 in the emergence of the Aam Aadmi Party, and during the assembly elections in 2013 we saw at least 2 people who were very young, 2 Sikh men who were very young in 1984 riots, who went on to become MLAs for the party. During the Lok Sabha elections, you yourself, after spending almost 3 decades, joined the Aam Aadmi Party contest as a candidate from Ludhiana. Jarnail Singh, journalist and political activist, who created a storm in 2009 when he chucked the shoe at the Home Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram. How do you look at the Sikh leadership and its involvement with politics? They continue to be involved with Congress, they continue to be involved with the Gurdwara politics. Delhi Gurdwara has been dominated to a great extent by the Congress for a long period of time. How do you look at this entire process?
You see, in elections, the past plays some role.
Right.
But it is more predominantly the present.
Right.
The present and the future in the context of the present. That is what the people normally see.
Right.
Now, after 1984, the Sikhs blindly voted for the BJP for almost 15 years.
Right.
For 15 years. But they were disillusioned with the BJP.
Right.
So therefore, the drifting towards the Congress started at that stage. Now, after that, the emergence which is happening now the Sikhs, their own party, that's Akali Dal, is known as the Sikhs' own party.
Right.
Now the Sikhs are by and large are so disillusioned even with the Akali Dal, with the leadership of the Akali Dal. There are various factors, I don't know.
This is not the occasion to talk about it.
So now the point is that the reason is that what the Sikhs are deciding today is on the basis of what is the present and what is the future.
Right.
So that is the decisions are being made. The Sikhs have voted a large number for Aam Aadmi Party in 2013. In 2014 also in Delhi as well as in Punjab and rural areas they have blindly voted. So many votes.
And there is no guarantee now that they will continue to vote for the same party now.
But you see, there is never any guarantee.
Right.
I don't want to talk up as a politician of
No, definitely not.
But I want to say that the situation is that the past plays some role, but it is the present and the future. In whose hands our future is more safe.
People who enter politics, they always have greater stakes in the present and in the future. Yes, Uma sir.
Yeah, I actually think that one of the things we need to confront is unfortunately the balancing act that has been performed in the political public domain by equating one riot with another and cancelling it out.
Right.
Now the political rhetoric has actually not seen the dangers of a system in which targeted assaults are made against a group of people.
Right.
And as the targets simply shift, and there are other processes which allow, for instance, what appears to be you move on, but actually do you move on? Because both the denial of justice as well as the fact that you don't acknowledge the wrong done means that another riot can take place, another carnage can take place, and you can manage to get out of that also.
Right.
So in a sense, what groups of people will do is to deny the force of the older political groups, and I think one reason why Aam Aadmi Party did well both in Delhi and has a place is that they did say that they were going to return to the justice question.
Yes.
So that was critical. That was very important. It was, and that is important not only for the Sikhs. It's important for all of us because if you deny justice, you actually do not create the basis for an equal citizenship in your society, and you deny the basis of the real nation. And that is why I think it's important for us. We have to actually throw out the political class that believes in violence and rhetoric, engages in that, and in its place put in a civilized mode of demanding. Obviously we want democracy, we want to vote, but we should be voting on issues which are critical to us today, no doubt, as Phoolka Sahab said. But we don't forget the past. We don't forget the mistakes of the past. Right. That's for sure. That's something that you can never throw out. That must remain.
Right. Rahul, as somebody was very intimately connected with bringing to the world what happened in 1984, and also having seen the suffering and the nature of the horror which was perpetuated on the survivors. When we talk about 30 years later, what kind of a closure are you really looking at? What do you think would be that, okay, now it's time for me to not think about 84 anymore?
Justice. I think justice, the one word encapsulates what really is required even 30 years later, 35 years later. And I think that justice is becoming more illusionary as the time goes by. And as I said earlier, I don't think there's going to be much progress in this because none of the political parties are really interested in it. So I fear for whether this will actually go for closure or not.
Right. Mr. Phoolka, very quickly, do you think that it is not really possible to have a closure as Rahul said, or you think that there is actually some kind of a justice that is possible?
You see, he is right. The closure can be only by justice. But now the complete justice is not possible. Now we are fighting for a symbolic justice.
Right.
That at least among those leaders, at least 2 or 3, they should be hauled up under the law. We don't want to say that you make them stand in the chalk and shoot them. No. They should be dealt with according to the law. So it's a symbolic justice we are fighting for.
So Uma Chakravarti, do you think that symbolic justice is all that one can expect now?
Yeah, I think symbolic justice is very important.
Do you think that is important enough?
It is important, and he's Phoolka Sahab is absolutely right. And I returned to Phanda Singh, my informant, who was very unhappy with the transistor bombs that went off in Delhi. He said, no, that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for revenge. We're looking for justice.
Not definitely for Punjabi's code anymore.
Taraf se nyay ho. That is what people look for, because that's the only way. And you must also ensure that there are new, the targets don't shift and you don't create new victims of new violent situations. So our responsibility is also, in remembering 84, is to say that 84 should not be forgotten. Justice should be done, but justice should be done to every
within the framework of law, and I think that is the most important takeaway. Thank you very much for coming and joining me on this very important program, because it takes note of one of the saddest chapters in India which should not have happened. Thank you very much once again. Every year, as October comes to an end and November sets in, it is time to choose between 2 narrative streams of tragedy. One stream is based on Indira Gandhi's assassination, while the other uses the riots that follows as the kernel. It is unfortunate that the twin tragedies are often set up as one against each other. One was a result of political opportunism which ended contrary to expectations. The other was a result of a sentiment that sought vengeance against people who had little to do with the first tragedy. To some extent, India has recovered, and we hope this program has enabled you to have a better and a more well-informed opinion on one of the most traumatic episodes in Indian history. Do give us your feedback and write to us at historylstv@gmail.com. We will return next week. There will be another page from history and another panel of experts. Till then, goodbye.